He could only listen to Joy's cries of "Stop it. It's hurting me." His tears flowed freely, a silent torrent of grief and impotence washing over him as he witnessed the violation of his beloved. Every morning, Joy arrived at the office parking lot at exactly 8:15 a.m. Her sleek black sedan gleamed in the morning sunlight, announcing her arrival. Brian, a junior accountant at the firm, always made sure to be near the entrance, casually checking his phone or pretending to chat with colleagues. But his real motive was clear: to catch a glimpse of her. Joy had a magnetic presence. Her tall, curvaceous figure and confident walk turned heads everywhere she went. She favored fitted pencil skirts paired with elegant blouses that accentuated her hourglass shape. Her high heels clicked rhythmically against the tiled floors, and when she moved, her hips swayed in a way that seemed to dance to an unspoken rhythm. Her hair was always perfectly styled, and the faint floral scent of her perfume lingered in the air long after she passed. Brian had admired her from afar for months. Each morning, as Joy stepped out of her car, he found himself drawn outside under the pretense of handling some urgent matter. He'd fumble with his phone or shuffle some papers, but his eyes were glued to her. The way her skirts hugged her calves and the confidence in her stride mesmerized him. Joy was approachable and kind to everyone, which made her even more appealing. Yet, Brian couldn't muster the courage to speak to her beyond the usual office greetings. Every time she smiled at him, his heart raced, and he found himself imagining what it would be like to know her on a deeper level. One crisp Thursday evening, as the office was winding down, Brian saw his chance. Joy was gathering her things, preparing to leave. The soft glow of the setting sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden hue on her face. Summoning every ounce of courage, Brian approached her. "Joy," he began, his voice steady despite his pounding heart, "can I talk to you for a moment?" Joy looked up, her eyes meeting his. She smiled warmly, gesturing for him to sit beside her. "I've been meaning to tell you something," Brian said, shifting nervously in his seat. "I've admired you for a long time. You're intelligent, kind, and, honestly, the most beautiful person I've ever met. I think I've fallen for you." Joy blinked, taken aback by his honesty, but there was no trace of discomfort on her face. Instead, she gave him a thoughtful look. "Brian, that's very sweet of you," she said softly. "I didn't realize you felt this way. But, you'll have to give me some time to think about this." Brian nodded eagerly, relief washing over him. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know how I feel." As Joy walked to her car that evening, Brian stood by the window, watching her leave. He didn't have an answer yet, but the possibility of a future with her filled him with hope. Little did he know, Joy was driving home, smiling to herself, replaying his words in her mind. Something about his sincerity had touched her heart. The next day, Joy arrived at work as she always did, precisely at 8:15 a.m. Her car glided smoothly into the parking lot, and as usual, she stepped out gracefully in her fitted navy blue dress and black heels. Brian was already by the entrance, pretending to adjust some files in his hands, but his eyes darted toward her. Today, however, was different. Brian's heart raced faster than usual, and his mind was preoccupied with one thought: her answer. As the day unfolded, everyone at the office seemed immersed in their tasks, but Brian struggled to focus. He repeatedly glanced at Joy, hoping for some kind of sign. Yet, she remained busy, engrossed in her work, her eyes fixed on her screen as if nothing was weighing on her mind. By the time the clock struck 5 p.m., Brian couldn't take the suspense any longer. He decided to wait near the office exit, hoping to catch her before she left. The evening air was cool, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the pavement. Brian stood there, rehearsing his words, his palms slightly damp with nervousness. Minutes turned into an hour, but Joy didn't appear. Growing anxious, Brian finally decided to go to her desk. He found her standing near the office kitchenette, organizing some papers. Gathering his courage, he approached her. "Joy," he began hesitantly, his voice trembling slightly, "I've been waiting to hear from you." Joy looked up and smiled gently. "I'm sorry, Brian. Work kept me busy today. But I've been thinking about what you said yesterday." Brian's breath caught in his throat. "And?" Joy set the papers down and looked him straight in the eyes. "I think you're genuine, and I appreciate the way you approached me. I'd like to give us a chance." Brian's face lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. "Really? Thank you, Joy. I promise I'll make you happy." They talked for a few minutes longer, outlining their feelings and expectations. By the end of the conversation, they had reached an agreement to take things slow but intentionally. Both left the office with smiles, their hearts lighter than ever. After 5 months of dating, countless conversations, and growing closer, Brian and Joy decided it was time to take the next step. They agreed to meet at the bishop's church to plan their wedding. That Sunday, they attended the morning church service together. Joy looked radiant in a simple yet elegant floral dress, and Brian wore a crisp white shirt paired with dark trousers. During the service, they exchanged meaningful glances, silently reaffirming their decision to commit to a lifetime together. After the service, they made their way to the bishop's house, where they were warmly welcomed. The bishop, a kind and wise man, listened to their story and congratulated them on their decision. After some discussion, he suggested a wedding date 2 months away, a date both Brian and Joy found perfect. "May this union bring you both joy and fulfillment," the bishop said as he handed them a small booklet with wedding planning guidelines. Brian and Joy thanked the bishop profusely before leaving the house. As they stood outside, the cool afternoon breeze brushed against their faces. "This is it," Brian said, holding Joy's hand. "We are really doing this." Joy smiled and squeezed his hand. "Yes, we are. And I couldn't be happier." They parted ways, each heading home to begin preparations for the biggest day of their lives. The journey that began with admiration and a heartfelt confession was now leading them to a lifetime of love and partnership. The sun rose gently on the day of Joy and Brian's wedding, casting a warm glow over the town. Inside Joy's home, a flurry of activity had already begun. Joy sat in the center of the room, surrounded by her bridesmaids, her excitement mingling with nervous anticipation. Her mother, tears of pride brimming in her eyes, gently wrapped Joy's fingers with delicate gold rings as a part of a family tradition. The beauticians worked skillfully to bring out Joy's natural radiance. Her hair was styled into soft waves, adorned with sparkling hairpins that matched her gown. The dress itself was a masterpiece, pure white, flowing with elegance, and fitted perfectly to her silhouette. Her bridesmaids adjusted the veil, making sure it cascaded gracefully over her shoulders. "Joy, you look like a queen," one of her bridesmaids said, stepping back to admire the transformation. Meanwhile, at Brian's home, the groom was also preparing. Dressed in a sharp black tuxedo with a crisp white shirt and a bow tie, Brian exuded confidence. His best man helped adjust his cufflinks, teasing him about how he couldn't stop smiling. By mid-morning, 2 luxurious cars pulled up to their respective homes. The bride's car, a gleaming white limousine, waited to escort Joy, while Brian's black luxury sedan was ready to take him to the church. As the cars moved through the streets, people paused to admire the grandeur. It wasn't every day that a love story so pure culminated in such a beautiful celebration. The church was packed with family, friends, and well-wishers. The moment Brian entered, the organ began to play softly, and everyone turned to admire the groom. He walked confidently to the altar, his heart racing as he thought about seeing Joy in her wedding gown. Moments later, the church doors opened, and Joy appeared, her arm linked with her father's. The congregation rose to their feet, their applause and cheers filling the space. Joy's beauty left everyone breathless, but it was the love shining in her eyes that captivated Brian as she walked down the aisle. The ceremony began, filled with heartfelt vows, hymns, and blessings. The bishop presided over the event, speaking about the sanctity of marriage and the journey the couple was about to embark on. "Brian, do you take Joy to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Brian said firmly, his voice steady with emotion. "Joy, do you take Brian to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Joy replied, her voice soft yet filled with conviction. The rings were exchanged, and the bishop declared them husband and wife. As they shared their first kiss as a married couple, the congregation erupted in applause, the sound echoing through the church. After the ceremony, the newlyweds and their guests moved outside for a grand photo session. The photographers captured every moment, the laughter, the joy, and the love that radiated from the couple. The group then dispersed to a nearby banquet hall for a lavish lunch. The room was adorned with flowers and elegant decorations, creating an atmosphere of celebration. Toasts were made, laughter was shared, and the couple was showered with gifts and blessings. By late afternoon, as the sun began to set, Joy and Brian made their way to the nearby lake for more photos. The golden hour light created a dreamy backdrop, and the pictures captured their love in its purest form. As night fell, the couple retired to a luxurious nearby hotel room they had rented for their first night together as husband and wife. The room was tastefully decorated, with soft lighting and a bouquet of red roses waiting for them. Brian held Joy's hand as they stepped into the room. "This is just the beginning," he whispered, his eyes filled with love. Joy smiled, her heart swelling with happiness. "And I'm ready for everything that comes next." Joy and Brian were still basking in the afterglow of their wedding ceremony, sprawled on the plush sofa of their luxurious rented apartment. The champagne flutes lay abandoned on the coffee table, remnants of their joyous celebration. A sharp rap on the door shattered the blissful silence. Brian cautiously peeked through the peephole. Three imposing figures, their faces obscured by shadow, stood on the other side. Their menacing postures sent a chill down his spine. He hesitated, a war raging within him. He could call the police, but the apartment was on a secluded street, help might arrive too late. Fear warred with his protective instincts for Joy. Taking a deep breath, he slowly turned the knob. One of the men, a hulking brute with a cruel glint in his eye, shoved Brian aside with brutal force, his grip like a vice on his arm. He was propelled into the apartment, the door flung open wide for his accomplices. Before Brian could react, he was thrown against the wall, the air knocked from his lungs. He watched in helpless horror as the three men advanced on Joy, their faces devoid of any humanity. Her screams pierced the air, a desperate plea that was swallowed by the brutality unfolding before Brian's eyes. He tried to rise, to fight, but his body felt heavy, his were broken. He could only listen to Joy's cries of "Stop it. It's hurting me." His tears flowed freely, a silent torrent of grief and impotence washing over him as he witnessed the violation of his beloved. The scene played out like a nightmare, the apartment transforming from a haven of love into a chamber of unspeakable horror. When the ordeal finally ended, an unbearable silence descended. The three men vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Brian crawled towards Joy, his body shaking with sobs, offering the only comfort he could in the face of such unspeakable trauma. The luxurious apartment, once a symbol of their love and happiness, now stood as a stark reminder of their shattered world. The champagne flutes, symbols of joyous celebration, now mirrored the bitter tears that flowed endlessly down Brian's face. The night had irrevocably altered their lives, leaving an indelible scar that would haunt them long after the physical wounds had healed.